All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is 6:05. We're going to start the meeting of December 1st. Will you all please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty, and justice for all. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. First item we have are the minutes of November 17th. What is the wish of the board? Second. Been moved by Jeff, seconded by Nate. Any changes or tweaks to the minutes? So none, all in favor? Aye. Okay. Next up, we have the public comments.
Hello, my name is Bobby Ann. I live on Brown Road. I find it interesting that the numbers of COVID cases continue to fluctuate dramatically every day at DCS, even though you're forcing our children and your staff to wear masks. I repeat my question from the last board meeting on November 17th. If masks work, then why is COVID still spreading through your school? Even with the spread, 0 children have died from COVID in New Hampshire. Why are you forcing your medical beliefs on our children? Many parents and tax-paying residents of Deerfield believe all medical decisions concerning our children should only lie on our shoulders. It is not your job to force suffocation devices on our kids due to a few scared individuals. You have no right to make any medical decisions for our families. At our evidentiary hearing with the Superior Court last week, your attorney stated that the only reason for calling a special meeting under RSA 197.2 is for monetary and emergency spending reasons. Nowhere in any of the connecting RSAs does it say that, nor does it say that you have the right to decline a petition special meeting. RSA 197.9 actually says the opposite. You have unreasonably refused our special meeting, and your explanation of wanting to help save your community money is ludicrous at this point. Your budgeted $10,000 to go toward legal fees at the beginning of this school year has already been surpassed at this date. So, by fighting against your community for this special meeting, you're actually wasting your money and ours. You may be advised by your lawyers that the people of Deerfield do not deserve a special meeting to vote for making masks and face coverings optional. But you need to wake up. Just because you were elected by your community for these positions, I've elected for many of you, just because of that doesn't give you the right to take away our community's freedoms. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Additional comments?
Greg Whitmore, North Road. Let's see, 3 months with an unscientific mask mandate. Well, there's no difference between schools that have a mask mandate and that don't. There's literally no difference when we look at the numbers. If there was, people would be screaming it from the hilltop, see, we told you masks work. But they don't, there's no difference, absolutely none. But it's great because at a previous meeting, the decision was made to keep masks until vaccines are available and administered. Guess what? Time's about up. Right? By the next meeting, anyone who has wanted their kids to be double jabbed can have done so. Because let's be completely clear and honest. You first said masks were put in place to keep the kids safe, but the kids were never in danger. It was never an issue. So then you pivoted to, well, they could bring COVID home and spread it. Well, now we're to the point where the concerned families can have everyone in their household vaccinated. So there's now no more reason for universal masking. So I guess this means that at the next meeting, 2 weeks from now, when there will have been 1 month separating initial from the second injection for anyone who wants it, ages 5 to 11, you will be announcing that we're getting rid of universal masking, right? Because that was the plan. I really hope I'm starting to hear that sort of thought process coming in 2 weeks. In regards to high school choice, I've been looking into it a lot. You know, this is something that's been coming down the pipe for quite a while, and I really think there's no comparison between Co-Brown and Concord. Co-Brown is just a far superior school. It's consistently ranked much higher than Concord. It is significantly closer. I mean, the thought of sticking my kid on a bus for hour and a half to get to school, or on the days where I have to pick her up, you know, taking me 40, 45 minutes to get there while she just sits there and waits, it's just crazy when we have a superior school 15 minutes away. The courses available are incredible. I was amazed as I was going through their course catalog today to see the opportunities available right at the top of the road, all right? So please take this all into consideration. You know, when I mean, I don't even know what length of contract you're looking at. I don't know if you're looking at a 10-year contract, but if you're gonna lock us into a 10-year contract, do it with the better school, all right? Thank you.
Any additional comments from the public? No? Okay. Thank you very much, folks. Next up, agenda review. Penny, is there anything we need to add?
Under non-public session, we will need A, C, and E.
All right, anything from the board members? High school building expansion. We will move to.
I think we can
And there's no consent.
Correct.
Okay. Review of correspondence, process for email retention. I think I only got one email and it came in very, very late today. To be entirely honest, I got it while I was driving here, so I haven't had a chance to read it. So I mean, we can certainly something we can summarize at the next meeting. I still want to float the idea, and I'll float the idea to the board of this, is I do like the idea of us adding emails that are submitted to the board in its entirety to the minutes. I would note that we would want to redact anything that was student specific. And I would also note that if a community member sent an email and asked us not to add it to the minutes, although it would be subject to right to know, I would be willing to honor that request as well. So my question for the board is, and I'll ask for Patty's opinion as well, and I'll ask for Patty's opinion first, is how do you feel?
I think that certainly makes sense if you'd like to attach them. I have no problem with that. Can you just be clear what you want us to do with them when we post the minutes? You want us to post the minutes with the right to know request, if that's
Post the
board's
minutes
direction.
with the emails.
Attached
Yeah,
to the minutes.
that's my thought at least, but I'm looking for feedback.
Yeah, and then just clarification, our review of minutes is not going to include a review of the emails, or?
I think what it does is it attaches emails to the public record. So if anybody wanted to see the emails that were received by the board, as in all 5 members of the board, they could simply go to the minutes and see any emails that were received by the board.
Within what, like for instance, today's email, like comes in the day of a meeting, you can't get that in the, would you put that in the minutes, or you're saying up until like 3 days in advance? Or?
It could, I think it could be up until the day before maybe, or whatnot, and then, like an email received an hour before a meeting would just be attached to the following meeting. But effectively, they become part of the public record.
And if the question of deciding whether they're addressed to the whole board, or whether there's a request for them to remain confidential within the bounds of right to know, that would be decided by you, and it would be decided by Patty. It's pretty straightforward, but those would be decisions made by not the whole board.
I think the simplest one is if it's addressed to the board as a whole, then it, simply that meets that threshold, and then unless there's a specific request for it to not be added to the minutes or to be kept confidential, again, it can be asked to be kept confidential, but unless there's certain circumstances, it's still subject to right to know.
Correct.
So, I mean, anybody could request it at any point. My thought process is it just makes it very easy to say, you want to see the emails received, minutes are all online, and you're welcome to go browse through them.
We would just need a process to make sure we're not always copied on the board emails, so one board member perhaps would be in charge of forwarding the emails to us if we're not copied.
So, I think the first question is do we want to pursue down that path, and then maybe the second part is we revisit in a couple of weeks with a better idea of exactly what it is. If that's where this board wants to go, if not, I'm going to let it die right here and move on.
No, I'm in support of it. I think we should come up with a process whereas once the agenda's been voted, emails received directed at the board prior to the agenda being posted will become part of that public record for that meeting. Any emails received following posting of that agenda will be posted the following day. And it's very clear, black and white steps on how we do it, so that the policy can apply. It's not just haphazardly.
And I might just, to that extent, I would probably tie it to a day of the week, so anything received prior to Tuesday, right? Because the agenda may get posted on Thursday, it might get posted on Friday, and I quite frankly, I do the agendas, but I don't pay attention to what day they actually get publicly posted.
Day before.
Yeah, so if we just say anything received prior to Tuesday, it's going to be added to the minutes. And then we would leave it, I would say, to the superintendent to redact any information already in the minutes.
That'd be enough time.
No.
No?
No, it doesn't.
Well,
I think,
or do we push them to the following meetings?
yeah, if there's redactions needed, then we definitely need more time on that. If there's nothing in there that's student specific, that's easy to just
I
attack.
think that makes more sense anyway, because at tonight's meeting, we reviewed and approved the minutes for our prior meeting.
Okay.
So we can talk about the emails that we get at that meeting, but they won't be included in the minutes until we approve.
So why don't we start with this? Do we want to proceed with some plan along those lines? As a yes or a no?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So then why don't, I think why don't we, should that be something that's codified into some sort of policy then, or is that meant to be like a process?
That's fine, we can just do it as a board process.
As a process, okay. So then, why don't I noodle around over the course of the next week on exactly how we would execute said process, and then we'll just pick it up at the next meeting to finalize. I'll write some sort of process.
Deal.
Does that work for everybody?
Yeah.
Good, okay. Anything else from correspondence? All right. Is Chris here? We just placed Chris.
He went to the control room, so
He's trying to find the heat, isn't he?
Yes, but I don't think he's actually planning on speaking.
All right, so then in that case, as far as final fire panel updates go, I believe,
Yeah, he sent an update.
so we're waiting for one more component to come in for them to finish up that work, and then it's just a matter of a little bit of wiring troubleshooting, from my
Yeah.
understanding.
Correct, he's guesstimating about 8 more hours of work, so hopefully a day and a half, once that work is in, he's waiting on a timeline for the park. So hopefully hear back in the next day or two, once that timeline is for that.
Perfect. Chris has been great about getting that daily email out to
Right, yeah.
everybody involved, which has been phenomenal. So I would say let's just continue updating on that, and hopefully the troubleshooting goes easy on the wiring up. I guess it was up on the second floor from what I understand.
Correct.
We can button this up and be done. Cool. All right. That brings us to board reports, PTO.
We're not doing much right now, but we have some things up our sleeves. Be looking for the move-ins at May, and that's about it. Not much going on right now.
Awesome. Any questions with the PTO?
Oh, can I just do a big thing?
can,
Okay, so 8th grade sold gingerbread houses. Thank you to anyone who ordered.
awesome, all right. I just want to note, because I've beaten Jeff in every race I run against him, if he shows up to move in the May, I'll beat him again. At least lately. Let's see.
Is it like a pipe to me?
Nate, did the executive board meet in the last 2 weeks? All right, and Principal Withy's not here. Brian, do you have any updates for us?
I do have a short principal's report. So this is from November 18th through December 1st, today. So on Thursday, 11/18, Chris Latika was here for his monthly meeting with 8th grade. They're working on developing a meeting interdisciplinary unit on climate change. So they'll go across all subject grades with that, including working with corporate facility areas of technology. On Monday, 11/22, 5th grade held their annual calendar unveiling. This was done outside of the portico. They already got several orders that event night, so that was excellent. So thank you to the community for always supporting this fundraiser. And our 5th graders are hoping to use this money for their annual trip to Boston. It might be a little different this year, but that's their goal. The basketball season is up and running. The girls had their first game at Barrington yesterday. And for a Barrington resident, I'm happy to say that both the Deerfield A and B teams won. So good job to our girls. We're still, the boys practice team has been kind of put on the back burner a little bit. We're waiting on fingerprints, it's been very slow. So hopefully we'll have our coach up and running by Monday. I ran tryouts the last 2 nights and not doing much about basketball besides March Madness. I'll try my best.
You set the brackets up?
So, I think I called a few jump balls when it shouldn't have been jump balls. And today the curriculum committees met for PD Wednesday, and updates will be provided at the next CRP meeting. So, that's all I got.
All right. Any questions for Brian? All right. Let's see. That brings us to the CRP.
December 13th.
Next meeting, we'll be talking CRP. Excellent. Mr. Kelly.
All right, so the building expansion committee is moving and continues to move at a quick pace. We have selected the option that we're gonna be proceeding with, which is now option A2. It adds quite a bit of educational space to the building. On the right side, it was originally known as option 2 when they saw it. Additionally, the committee selected a construction management firm. They're going to be moving forward to the board for approval. Are we ready for that tonight? I wasn't part of the conversation.
Probably in non-public session, we're gonna compare bids and talk about the companies, and then
Okay,
it'll be up to you when we come up, if you wanna do that or not.
cool, sorry. And yeah, we're looking good. You know, it's gonna be tight. We'll continue to look good on having something ready for warrant article this year. Next meeting is Wednesday before this next board meeting.
Any questions for Jeff? None? All right. Nate, on the high school options.
Updated last time about our meeting with Co-Brown, but we continue to move forward, but no, nothing to report this meeting.
Have we been able to get a reschedule yet?
No, I need to get some dates from you and Nate with our 3 calendars and try to find some dates to propose to Concord to
And
reschedule.
I will certainly, we had to reschedule our last meeting with Concord. I was unfortunately unexpectedly unavailable for a short period of time. So that created a little bit of a scheduling snafu, but we'll get it. Any questions outside of that from the board to Mr. Oxnard on the high school options? I don't know if there's anything to talk about.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's, just to be clear for anyone listening at home, the reason there's nothing to talk about is because we're currently negotiating and talking with different schools, and that's something we can't talk about at these meetings.
Yes, right. When we can, we will. All right, let's see, NBC updates, that falls on me. The NBC is in the throes of its season, so we are meeting on a weekly basis. Last night, the NBC more or less buttoned up the town's budget. It still has to wait for the finalized bottom line from the town administrator. There was a couple of tweaks they made on the town side. So I believe Tuesday of next week, John should be finished with that bottom line for the NBC. That should be a quick part of the meeting. There is potential next week that Valley Renzinger may be presenting to the NBC in regards to the overall kind of design and ideas behind what we're looking to accomplish with renovations and additions. Not necessarily, the numbers aren't ready yet, but as far as the overall big picture of what it might look like. That being said, the NBC is hoping that we have a budget to give to them at the next meeting. There's a few steps we have left in between. One of them is actually wrapping up our budget and then giving us some staff time to prepare the binders, which I don't know if they'll be ready for Tuesday or not, but if not, I would certainly suspect that the following week we'll be ready to rock and roll with folks at the NBC.
So the issue is not necessarily the binders themselves, but all the documents that need to be in the binder. I don't want you to, you can't make binders in a week, we can't do
Right.
that.
Yeah, so why don't we're probably looking at, what, 2 weeks from yesterday to really be able to get the NBC, get going with the NBC.
Yeah, I don't think we won't be ready. I would say it would be unlikely all the binders will be completed by Tuesday. If you wrap up your budget tonight, you can certainly send the budget electronically so they have some advance time to review it. You can get that bottom line, but all the documents that go into the budget binder, I'm not sure will be completed.
So, based on the
By
outcome of
Tuesday.
our budget conversation tonight, I will then go ahead and reach out to the chairman of the budget committee tomorrow and kind of give an update. And let him know what we're looking at tentatively. I prefer to make sure that when we give the committee the budget, it is complete, no backup information, obviously. But I'll talk to the chairman and see what his thoughts are.
We do post the budget every single time we go over it on the website, so anyone that wanted to start looking at it is welcome
Well,
to do
certainly
that.
has access to it. Once we turn it, once the board
Goes.
physically gives them a
Right.
budget, whether it's the full package or just the raw data, it's their budget and we are effectively, so we want to make sure I defer to them everything.
The meetings that are on
Tuesdays at 6 o'clock for anybody that's interested at the George Dwight Building. A good time. Andy, I believe you're going to want to start joining us as soon as next week, it looks like. And if La Valley is going to be presenting, if we can make that work in the schedule, any of the other board members that are interested in attending. If it works out with La Valley to have them there, I'll have Patty send an email to the board just to let everybody know. In which case, if you want to come, that would be a great meeting to participate in, or at least be present for. And then we'll let Andy get a feel for budget committee stuff, and maybe next year you'll want to do the budget committee. Sure. All right. Any other NBC questions? All right, that brings us to the budget, which Patty has given us updated copies of.
Yes.
All right, you can lead us through it?
Yes, Amber did all the hard work for me.
Alright.
She did a SAU memo for you that outlines all the changes. Unfortunately, she did make a change this afternoon on the first one on line 103, and when she did that, it put every single other line off one line. So I'll just give you the correct lines. They're only like one line off. You'll find it. It won't be an issue, but just wanted to point that out. So is it okay if I just read her memo?
You're 100%.
She put it together, I'd like to read it to you. Good evening, Deerfield Board. First, I'd like to apologize for not being able to be with you this evening due to an illness. I wanted to take a moment and provide you with a brief review of the budget packet and hopefully offer some extra explanation on some items. The packet, as it has in the past, any changes have been highlighted in yellow. I have color-coded the expenses that have decreased in red and increased in blue in the change column. Some general notes on the changes that were made since we last met. And that's where I will walk you through. So the first change, and that was something that we did this afternoon that we noticed, I had spoken to you, I believe, about Josh's desire to get some more wireless access points and that E-rate was gonna cover half the cost. We didn't have the other half of the cost in the budget, so that added $2,720 under line 103. So if the actual cost would be double that, but E-rate pays the other half. And then on line 124, we did identify some multi-year contracts, so we put the salaries in, so they won't be in the pooled increases, they're already under contract for a set amount, so Amber has filled those in. 275 and 276 is another multi-year contract, so the salary is filled in instead of in the.
So Patty, actually, before you go speaking on, sorry, line 124, was that 84 not in the last time, or was the updated,
I think the current was in there, if I remember
Current was in
correctly,
there.
yeah,
So the change is only a few thousand.
is right, correct.
So we're two-
And the same thing applies for line 275, that's a multi-year contract, so that is updated to reflect the amount that was already voted on when you did the multi-year contract. And then lines 343 and 346, depending on whether you're looking at the note or the budget line, they're all of those lines. Have to do with transportation, so you had asked Amber to change the increase to 12%. So she did that, and this includes 7 buses for the school and 3 buses for the high school. Lines 363, 364, 5 and 6, they're all in grouped together. When the multi-year contract salaries were added in, those lines were affected, so all the fringe benefits, life insurance, disability, FICA, all of those things, when salaries increase, those increase, so those were added.
And so the next update of this, when it goes to the NBC, those are gonna be green, right?
Yep, all the yellow will be gone, so this is, the yellow is only for tonight.
For tonight.
Yep, and then the separation benefit was listed at $1, no one put in for separation benefit for next year, so that is at $1. Workers' comp is another one of those lines that changed when salary lines changed. We have added a pool, a 3% pool for non-certified increases on line 374. And then, I'm making sure I'm not skipping any of Amber's notes. Line 389, the transfer to food service amount changed a little bit. There were some revenue changes and increases for staff that would change the food service budget, so that was up a little bit. And then on line 410, again, because the food service line changed, that food service program line changes on for Fund 4 on line 410. So any questions about the change?
So just for anybody that might be watching, what we're currently looking at is a proposed budget of $15,425,609, which would be a 2.62% increase over last year's budget, which was the default budget of $15,018,402. So it's an increase of $393,820. All things considered, we've done a pretty good job of, you guys have done a pretty good job of keeping it relatively flat. A lot of the increases that are there are contractual anyway, so, just in salaries alone, you've done a phenomenal job. Is there any items the board wants to discuss further on this? From a discretionary standpoint, there isn't really a whole lot of room. Is there any wants or needs, Brian, that aren't being included in this?
No, I mean, I think I think the shake-up has been the grant money, you know, and we've updated a lot of items through that, so we just kind of helping kind of keep this one.
And the fund balance from last year is,
Yeah,
and that was because of the grant too, a lot
Right.
of that, so that was really helpful to
Yeah.
do some upgrades.
Can we talk about the revenue changes, or do we want to wait on
We're gonna go through the revenue
That'll be
sheet in here, is that what you mean?
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
I have it.
that? Then before we get to that, maybe a question about, just about the separation benefit and essentially no carrots this year.
Right, correct.
Seems like a good thing, but
I think so.
surprising that in this.
I can't
Right.
believe that happening ever. Has that ever happened?
I'm surprised by that, especially after the experiences we've had.
Well, I mean, the deadline is November 1st, so someone could still decide and just not put in for the benefit. So certainly people have the entire rest of the year to decide that they're gonna retire after all.
That November 1st date is in the contract,
Is right, if they want the separation benefit,
which
which
would
is,
be,
I think, 6,000, does that sound right? Something like that. So,
but that's a contractual,
guarantee,
it's a
but the contract,
contractual
yeah.
item, so in that case, it's
Right.
not really, does seem unique. So is there gonna be, so we don't have any, we're not replacing necessarily any step mothers.
correct,
We have a couple of holes to fill,
correct,
but that's it.
as of right now.
That's nice.
We have an updated food service budget, and again, that was something that we mentioned, was revenue transfers and then the in-staff increases that were added in. The revenue sheet, and I will do my very best, but this is absolutely Amber's expertise,
Should
so
we dispose of the budget if we're not that, or do we want to put it?
I think if we go through the revenue, because it could potentially change, something, you can make a change, so just to talk through that, and then I would have to get back to you with questions, that I would be able to answer if you have any.
Okay.
So the estimated revenue, there's a slight increase for fiscal year 22-23. The breakdown, bless you. The breakdown will show that, as has been anticipated, the adequacy aid, we had one-time bumps, and we were warned that that was not going to continue. So the state did work with us on our ADMs and the free and reduced lunch. There was a waiver granted to look at prior years' free and reduced lunch, knowing the difficulties we've had. Everyone has had collecting applications while there have been free lunches provided. So there is still a decrease of $22,089. And there's an increase in catastrophic aid, and that's based on student services. That's an increase of about $59,000. There's a decrease in the child nutrition if we go back to charging for meals. So some of these may shift into different places on the revenue sheet depending on whether there's a continued offer of free meals. Increase in lunch sales, obviously, if we go back to charging, that's where that section would increase. We expect an increase in transfer to food service over this fiscal year because, as you know, that's dependent upon how much we anticipate the food service budget to cost as compared to revenues. Any offset has to be transferred from the Fund 1 budget to cover your food service program. Actual revenue shortfall, if you don't take into consideration the 2021 surplus and your warrant articles, is $21,510, so not bad at all in your overall revenue.
So a question about the, sorry, do I need to?
No, go ahead.
Question about the nutrition. So
Yeah.
if the state is paying for that, should it be a wash?
Not necessarily, because their reimbursable amount is not, we don't just put in and say, hey, we spent $5 a student on food, you need to give it back to us. They're gonna say your reimbursable amount is,
$3.
$3, and sorry you couldn't make that work, what you served, basically, is how
Now,
it
that
works.
being said, are they paying the free and reduced lunch rate? Is that
I don't know what the rate is, I don't know.
What are you saying, like for all
They,
students?
they have a set rate that they reimburse us, is
Okay.
what my understanding is from it.
Historically, the free and reduced lunch rate that they paid us in a call it a normal year actually exceeded what we were charging. About 50 cents or so at the counter, correct?
Okay, well, state education tax,
Yes.
looks significantly lower. Is that, can you talk about where that comes from? Is that the amount allotted by the state?
Yes, so, and if you look at the adequacy in the state education tax, it's almost a wash, it's very close. But in our adequacy funding, we did get, like I said, the bump that we were, informed that we were gonna get a bump for this biennium, but it is going to go away, so, you know, it's hard to say don't count on it, because while you can say that, your budget is still gonna go up when you don't get it.
And the state education tax revenue, what is that driven by? I know how the adequacy is.
I don't even wanna pretend to give you that formula,
That's fine.
so I can get Amber to give you a little brief summary though. I just don't have it in front of me and I don't wanna.
I had asked last time, and this might be part of a brief presentation from Amber, if we could do that maybe next time.
Yep.
If she can make it, but I was asking about changes over the last, let's say, 5 years, the retirement, support from the state retirement support. I know that's been, our contribution has gone up over 20% recently. But if she could get numbers maybe over the last 5 or 10 years, I would be curious to see that, and then maybe as part of that, a little more clarification on the state education tax.
So you just wanna know how our contribution has changed, or
Yeah.
both ours and the staff?
Really, it's our contribution.
I'm looking for our
contribution.
taxpayer contribution.
Yeah,
Okay.
and certainly under, if it's available at her next meeting, great, but I know she's also got 5 towns to prepare
That's fine.
for and some other stuff, so.
If it's not a presentation, would it be okay to get you a graph?
That's fine.
Because I'm sure she could send that along even if she can't be here to present
Yeah, that'd
it.
be fine.
Any additional, do we want to make any changes to the revenues? Certainly, historically, I don't think we ever have. We've always kind of, which provides.
Do we have any anticipated, another grant that might come through because of, is there another, we're looking at
The
another year of COVID grant that might
Well,
come?
the third round of ESSER doesn't end until 2024.
We
So,
still have funds
We've
left.
got,
available?
we haven't touched the third grant.
Okay. So do we have a kind of a, do you know what's available on the third grant?
So that's why we sent out the survey that you probably received in your email. We sent it out to as many people as we had on our listserv, asking people for their input so that we can develop a spending plan for the grant and what your priorities are, just to get some consensus, to get some public feedback. We had things like helping student learning loss, social emotional learning, upgrades to the facilities. So we're collecting that data. Did that close the 30th, Brian, do you remember?
Yeah,
I think it was the 30th, so
Is that any
we can
change
now-
or anything we can circle into?
we can now get those results together and we will have a spending plan for what our intention is for Deerfield for each of our districts.
Cool. January
Well, I will put January, that sounds like,
or it's February?
we'll shoot for January,
I know we got a lot going on,
we do,
and I don't want to.
we'll see, see if we can make it happen.
Any other questions regarding the revenues? All right, well, I've gone through the budget myself a bunch. And I think when you get into our budget, you really start looking at it and you realize how much of it is non-discretionary. There isn't a lot of fat that the administration leaves anywhere in the budget. And to a certain extent, they've always been so frugal with it. My concern is as much about them withholding a little too much or cutting things out and have to maintain that reality. So the first question, obviously, Ryan says that this gives everybody what they need and what they want. Any other items?
Yeah, my next question, that doesn't be the first question, my next question though is that we have not passed the budget in 2 years, and so is this, if we're putting this to the voters, then does this have a better chance of passing, is something we all can maybe think about as well, and are there changes that we want to try to make, increase the chances that it would pass? To serve our school district, our students.
I will tell you that if I could figure out what decisions the voters are gonna make at the ballot, I'd be much better man, but what do you try to, are you proposing to try to trim, to try to?
No, I don't have a clear plan right now. I'm just saying that as a board, I mean, that obviously that's, I think that's our goal just as much as supporting our students, but if we're on an annual, default budget cycle, then we're not supporting them as much as we could.
I certainly think it's prudent for us to put the best budget forward that we can, but I also think it needs to be real. And I certainly feel like this is very much a real budget. I mean, the increases in the budget are, this is nowhere to go. I mean, any reductions that we start putting into the budget, we're taking away from the students and the staff. I mean, we're gonna heat the building, we're gonna turn the lights on, we're gonna pay the staff. So it's a reduction in staff, or it's a reduction in programs, basically, for the students. It's the only way for us to start stripping money out of the budget. Is that a fair analysis?
Yes, if you were gonna try to match your default budget, you would certainly be cutting staff.
I think that's probably just like one of the most important messages. Really is, to have, if people are looking at the budget and to look at the green and understand that those are discretionary lines. And, I think that, working together with the staff last year, we worked to, be really diligent with the fund balance and take care of the things that need to happen with the building and, upkeep of, replacement of equipment and things like that. And I think that the staff has worked really hard to try to be diligent with using the grant funds that they're receiving to look at the urgent needs and apply the money to that, which, kind of brought us to where we are with this budget.
All right, so with that in mind, I'll make a motion that we approve the 22-23 proposed operating budget in amount $15,425,609.
Second.
Sure. Who wants it? Gigi can have it. All right, motion by myself, seconded by Gigi. Any additional discussion from the board? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that is unanimous. Do we need to move the default budget in this one?
I don't believe so. I'll check with Amber, but I don't think we do. If we do, we'll do it at the next meeting.
That's fine. And then we need to approve the new sheet.
Nope.
That's all set?
Let me actually text Amber.
Yeah, I say we can, I can't recall if we just reviewed or.
I think we have, but I'll make sure, then you don't walk away without completing everything.
Zach, are the warrant articles due this meeting as well, or do you want to?
I have, something with me, but you would need to, you would have to look at your trust fund balances and, determine whether or not you wanted to put some money aside for those. I don't think have you typically given the warrant articles on the first night of the MBC?
No, but I would say that if the board wants to at least start discussing any potential warrant articles, could I just get an idea? Do you have any ideas?
Kathy drafted something, but she didn't add all of your trust funds here, so I would just take that back to her to add, if you make any decisions tonight.
So, fund balance, trust fund balances, do you happen to have that? Right, Zach. Oh, is it in there?
No, this is last
I
meeting.
think I
Oh, I'm sorry, this was the one
prior booklet.
I was quite up to. Okay, sorry. So, I'd say the first question is, we have a number of trust funds. So what I'll do very quickly is I will just review the balances with the board. And then if the board has any interest in drafting warrant articles to further fund those funds, we can go deeper into that. So at the moment, we have a Deerfield School Special Education Trust Fund. Current balance is $218,268.55. I do not believe we have had to draw on that
many, many, many years.
for quite some time. So with that being said, that is our insurance policy in case we have a number of unanticipated special education cases that rely heavily on the budget. As you're all aware, special education will be funded, and without this, call it an insurance policy, that funding can take services away from the other students if we run out of money. Assessment?
As we go through these, is there, just for general reference, is there a limit to how much money we can hold on to in these trust funds?
No.
And is it, the interest is staying in there, or do we use the interest on this thing?
No, interest isn't.
Very close. Yep. So, maybe we'll just take them one by one as we go through them. So, that 218,000, obviously we haven't drawn it for a number of years. Is there any interest? Actually, 18, 19 funded pretty good in interest. But anyhow, didn't do so well last year.
No.
Is there any interest in adding to that?
It's more of a question.
Go ahead.
What's been the historical drawdown on that?
There hasn't been since.
Many years we haven't needed it.
We've been fortunate, but somebody moves into town and suddenly that fund could most certainly come into play.
So would just for conversation purposes, is this current balance, does that cover one student? Does it cover 5 students?
It depends on the student.
Okay,
It's a pretty big cushion. I think,
okay,
I don't foresee anything. I mean, I shouldn't even say that out loud, but
right.
I was just gonna say, knock on
don't
something.
say that, I know.
There's a number of factors that would have to play with for that to not be a cushion. And partially is that really only needs to buy us that 1 year buffer at a given point because special education will be in the budget. And
Right.
so it's really just, it's bringing us to the next.
And
budget.
keep in mind, you have other trust funds, so if you had to overrun your budget, you could look at other trust funds and see if there's anything that,
You could move.
like you could use one of your technology funds, trust funds for some technology that's in your budget to offset the over.
Perfect.
I think when we're looking at this, we should look at the school facility repair, and I'd actually like to.
Tell what first, we're gonna go there in a second.
Okay.
Sorry. So, any desire to play with the special ed, trust? None? Or is it tired?
That ties into my next one, which is we should need to look at moving money. I'd say that we should consider moving money from that trust to the building facilities repair. Because we've got the fire alarm panel.
You can't do that.
You can't move it from, no. So it would just be money back to the taxpayers?
Yes.
Yeah, so we could dissolve the trust and then give the money back to the.
That would require a vote.
Right.
Probably did.
So because the trust was created for a specific intent,
Gotcha.
the money has to live in that to be used for that. So special education trusts are specific. All right,
And I would say that probably every school in the state has a substantial trust fund.
for that purpose.
But for that time, that one time, when they did it.
Yeah. All right. Anything further on that trust? Okay. The Deerfield School Facilities Repair Expendable Trust, I'm sorry?
Can I just ask a question?
You can ask
And
anything.
since we're on this and I'm thinking about it, the fire panel, whatever that, I'm trying to follow the updates, but when we get an entirely new system instead of fixing what we have, does that have to be done prior to July 1st?
So that's what I wanted to circle back on the fire alarm panel.
Okay. I wasn't clear when it had to be, that portion had to be done.
So when you say, you're talking about if a bond doesn't pass, then we just go ahead and update the existing system and the existing structure?
Yeah, they're.
So if we need a $200,000 complete redesign of our fire panel, can that wait until this summer, or was Chief Fisher saying?
No,
You can fix, but you also have to do this other part.
I think he wants to see progress towards that.
Okay.
He understands that that's a.
So the fix is gonna hold us over until we do the next piece. Okay, that was my question. Thank you.
So that was certainly my understanding, Jeff, I want to see.
It needs to be done by July, is my understanding. or
in the works.
it doesn't have to be completed by July, but by July, as I understand it, we need to have an RFPO contractors working on it, progress forward. It can't be, oh, July 1st comes, now it's time to go to RFP to rebuild.
But we can use fiscal year, the next fiscal year. I guess I'm trying to figure out where you're getting this from, and if you're intending to take it from your facilities repair and depleting it,
Well,
that's why I'm asking, I don't know when this is
Yeah, so as
planned.
a little benchmark on it, just as a point of cost, we got numbers back from the architect that I should have said there in my update, but I forgot about it. But we're looking at roughly 226, call it, then engineering design fees, call it $250,000 to design and install a new system that needs code.
that's the architectural estimate.
Yes. Well, from the fire protection engineer. So $3 per square foot is what we do. So if the warrant article doesn't pass, we need to have that money available to do that.
So my thought process in that was actually, I don't necessarily know how to word the warrant articles, but I had thoughts. So there's gonna be a series of articles that may impact other articles, right? And so this is what Patty and probably, you know, you go over the public. So the primary article presumably is going to be an expansion project of X amount of dollars. In the event that that expansion project was to fail, will the town authorize us to draw X amount of dollars out of surplus funds to add into this account so that we can maintain enough money in there to replace the roof, and then use that also to support upgrading the fireworks system?
Correct.
Right? The second part of that, this was an additional question, is if a bond was to pass, the money in that fund isn't necessarily needed for facilities repair, because theoretically the facilities will have been repaired. So should that fund be dissolved and that money be used to offset the first year's bond? And can that money be dissolved to be used to offset the first year's bond?
I would, well, you would like to think nothing would go wrong with the new facility. Dissolving that and having nothing also sounds a little bit
Or do we draw it down to,
risky.
do we draw it down to 100K? And then take a substantial sum of that to transfer into, say, the renovation costs.
What's the amount?
$343,239.39. We are going to be drawing some of the work that is currently ongoing for the fire panel out of that to whatever sum that is.
So I don't know that you even need to have that on a warrant article, so if the fire panel is part of the facility, I guess if the bond passed and that was in it, then you might need the contingency, but otherwise you could say, we wanna put another $100,000 in the trust for the fire panel, and we're gonna take out 100 that's already in there.
My concern is if you specifically call out the fire panel on the warrant, and that doesn't pass, are we then forbid from spending any money on the fire system?
Yes.
Yeah.
My understanding would be yes.
Yeah,
So that's
I'm gonna
why,
have to have Dean craft this for us.
so,
This is what he does.
so there is the bond article,
Yeah,
and the language tied to the bond article, I'm sure Dean has that fairly well.
if it fails,
If that fails, I would want a second article to fund, I would say, an additional 200K, because we can draw into that to a certain extent, obviously, or 250K, probably 250K, to be drawn from fund balance if we want to raise and appropriate. And I can, so let's start with 250K, is that the agreed upon amount if we go down this road?
That's what the
Estimate would be? Okay,
And if they're not passing the bond, then
so if the bond doesn't pass, hopefully the community will say, well, we still need to continue to improve and upgrade the existing structure. So we're gonna continue with that. So that being said, would we want to draw the funds from a potential fund balance? Which we would only receive the funds if we had that amount of money left at the end of the year.
and it's a default budget.
And we're currently in a default budget, we don't know what it looks like, or do we want to raise and appropriate and have it just become an additional appropriation basically we're asking them to either give us additional money or not take as much money back.
But we don't need to finalize these decisions right now. We still have 2 more meetings to make these decisions.
Correct, I'm just thinking about trying to get the language lined up so that we have a chance to try to stew on
And
the
and
finalized
if
language.
these do go into your budget, so, yeah,
We
as
just
transfers,
appropriate.
right,
That's, well, they go into the following.
so we would have to, right, but I mean the packet, they really need
You're
to
right,
say,
no, I think
we would just
they're,
redo it,
they're gonna get warrant articles after the fact.
right,
All right, so feedback or direction from the board. We agree that we want to have a secondary article to fund potentially additional funds like a building repair trust.
Yeah, we're gonna need it. If we have a roof failure and we have to do the fire alarm, then we're gonna.
So,
I think it's riskier to raise and appropriate, because people may say this is an impact on taxation, I'm gonna say no, whereas if you use fund balance, that money's already been raised.
all right,
The
so
question is whether there'll be any left. Can we get an update on our budget next meeting?
Anything less than what? So that trust you know what,
No.
oh, you mean for where we're at for this year?
Yeah, because it's a default budget. If we're
Yeah.
looking like we're not gonna have any
Yeah.
surplus,
Right.
right.
then we're putting ourselves in a hole.
Right.
Is it feasible to ask Dean to draw the article with us?
Sure.
Can we do that? Sure. 250K is the agreed upon amount,
I like that.
everybody?
And that's in addition to what we have in there now, because it's already being drawn down.
Yeah, so that would give us a 343 less the current project plus potentially 250K on capacity. Which would, so it'd be, somewhere in the vicinity of 500.
So it sounds like this is an insurance policy for the fire.
I'll be honest with you, all of the trust funds are some way or another, some sort of insurance policy to a certain extent.
And if there's no, let's say that the surplus ends up being only 100,
That's what you get.
and then we sequence the warrant articles and that 100K
Correct.
would roll into the top line.
Right.
In front from the top.
Yeah, okay.
So the second question is, if Article 1, we'll call, or Article, so we have 2 technically.
Right,
the
the
bond.
budget.
Funds.
If the bond was to pass, do we want to dissolve a portion of those funds from that trust to be used for either first year's bond payment, if that's an option, and or used to offset tax, whatever. But we want to take, say, all but, leave 100K in that fund. Am I making any sense, Beth?
Yeah, yes.
And I'm getting nods across the board.
Are you talking about dissolving just that one?
Yeah, I'm just,
Not dissolving it, but
Leaving
reduce,
that- leaving
reducing it to
100,000.
100K.
right.
And then that just becomes, that fund essentially becomes equivalent to the special education trust fund, where it's there as an insurance policy in the event a pump blows up and we need to spend $30,000 or $40,000 dropping the well in the ground or something along those lines, we have to cap that for something that is unforeseen. Okay. Anything else regarding that?
Well, in a similar vein, there is also the paving fund, which was come obsolete, presumably paving is part of the bond.
But don't forget, your building isn't gonna be ready next year. If this passes, you can still have issues between now and construction that you would have to deal with.
For on the facility side. I think on the,
But the paving side is all about new.
so the paving side, that money was granted specifically for the paving of that, what's left of the upper parking lot, which we can't do because we are in the midst of a conversation about what we're gonna do. So,
But if the bond passes.
if the bond passes, I would also say we could take those funds.
If the bond fails and you don't know how long it's gonna take, are you gonna decide not to pave the parking lot for however many years it takes you to pass the bond?
So then in that case, you leave that there and you address it.
I think that would be
I like the idea of returning money. I think it's a
if it passes.
Yeah.
If
So,
it passes, I like the idea of returning money, I think it's a good option.
Yeah, I think having the contingencies, like we said, if that passes, then this, if this, then that.
so I would say, so to me, like in regards to the paving fund, I don't wanna close, I wanna leave some money in the fund because the action to create a fund is different than the action to fund a fund. So I would want to reduce the fund down to, say, $100, or $1,000, or whatever it may be, or maybe even a dollar probably satisfies the intent of keeping the fund open. So that 5 years, if we want to go in and say we want to add $20,000, it's a simpler action than actually creating a trust fund.
The catch is, I feel like there's language in that trust when it was set up that required us to consult with the conservation.
It did,
For that parking lot. So
if
we,
you're gonna pave it.
and so we would still have to consult with them regardless, although it being part of it.
Yeah, not, you would, that requirement is for paving the parking lot with this trust fund, that was part of the language to when you created the trust fund.
Send it back. Money.
Send it back to the taxpayers. That's,
Yeah, if,
I got you.
in the event that
I
the
see.
bond vote
Not
passes,
use it, send it, I see.
we'll give it back, it'll be returned to the taxpayers to offset the tax rate. We all in agreement with something along those lines, so
Yeah. But you were saying for the school facilities repair fund, that was not to send back, that was to put into the paying off the first bond, which is kind of like sending back, but not exactly.
I would let Dean determine,
I'm gonna give him all this information and that's the best approach.
okay. But the intent would be to use that money to help offset. And what you guys look at, same thing with the paving, we're all in agreement on that, universally? Nothing's set in stone, this is just to get articles back.
Yep, see the language.
Okay. All right, that brings us to, we do have a $273 in the playground trust fund. I suspect we'll leave that one alone. Okay. The Deerfield School Addition Capital Reserve Trust, that is currently being utilized, so we'll leave that one alone, presumably. Again, if, in the event that the bond passes, that money can theoretically shift towards. A lot of those are you shift towards the bond,
Well, it's not shifting toward the bond, it's
shifting towards offset.
correct,
Yeah.
which makes the taxes lower, which covers the bond payment.
So I would support, in the event that bond passes, at least seeing language that will allow us to shift that as well.
Which one?
The Addition Capital Reserve Trust, which is going to be reduced because we're going to be paying out for the current services being rendered.
Right,
Yeah,
you don't-
exactly.
and you don't know what that's gonna be.
Right, but whatever the balance is, we'll close that fund.
Are you gonna know that balance? Is that work gonna be completed?
It'd just be whatever the remaining balance was, right?
It won't be completed until
That's,
January something.
yeah, I don't think it can be completed.
Would it just be that we would close the fund?
I don't think
The
you- well,
remaining balance as
I
of
don't-
July 1, 2022 would be used to offset taxes.
No, I think we want to leave it open because if it doesn't pass, we're gonna want that money to be able to continue to tweak the design.
I think, so I guess my thought is if, in the event the bond passes.
It's not gonna be a huge amount of money.
Okay, all right, so we'll leave that one alone. All right, and then we have $182 in the facilities equipment expendable trust, so presumably we're leaving that alone, or do we want to add funds to that? Again, I don't think we need to in this case.
What was the fund?
The Deerfield Facilities Expendable Trust Fund. I'm sorry, Facilities Equipment Expendable Trust.
And that's kind of like,
Have we drawn that?
We have,
Yes.
we've drawn that down to just about nothing.
It was $25,000 and then we spent $24,999. And then you had.
Is that on kitchens?
Oh, that's right, you're absolutely correct.
So I guess I'm curious, do we need?
I would leave it open,
Yeah.
because I'm sure at some point you're gonna need equipment, it's not hurting anything sitting there, $182.
I think we just leave that one be for the time being. It's gonna be a,
You don't have to add to it, but I wouldn't get rid of the trust fund.
it's a fairly heavy ask, so I think, I like the idea of, we have a heavy ask, but we won't need this, so
How about that?
have it back. Is my mentality. All right, any other warrant articles that anybody else has doing around their heads?
just thinking about sort of previous years, we've asked for sort of like a survey kind of a thing as one of our warrant articles months. We've asked for, what are some of the other warrant articles, just in terms of ideas that you might be considering here?
We did the ballot questions regarding high school and the high school choice versus choice with tuition, and saw an inversion of results there. I don't know that there's necessarily,
Give that a big bite.
I think we
We're
have,
thinking of trying to use it to get input from the experts.
No, I'm just throwing that out there, that we've done it. I'm not saying that I have a particular,
I certainly feel like I think to my end, I think we're covered what we want to cover. And obviously, if anybody else has anything that comes to mind, we can revisit at the next meeting.
I've been telling.
Oh,
Yes, you should have them acknowledge both bottom lines because they both go on the warrant.
so with that information,
Bobby didn't walk away with us.
I would look for a motion to approve I'll make a motion to approve the proposed default budget of $15,270,438, a $252,036 increase from last year's defaults.
I'll second.
All right, I made the motion, Gigi seconded it, any additional discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye.
Okey-dokey.
Okay,
Thank you. Yeah, good job.
all right. Anything else regarding the budget, folks?
So it looks like at the moment we have, the first one will be the budget, the second will be the bond. Third one would be if the bond fails, funding facilities, and money from the surplus to facilities. The fourth one will be if the bond passes, then the other language will be roll money into paying off some of the banks of the cost of the bond.
And then an additional one for doing something similar with the paper. All on the same page?
I will draft them and then you can do whatever you'd like. If we, if we don't capture something correctly, you can amend it here at the next meeting. But I'll have Dean put the language in there so that we're compliant at least. You may be confused, but compliant.
All right, anything else budget related, folks? All right, we are done with the budget. That brings us to some policy stuff.
So the background investigation still needs work. The GBD board staff communications, so we found out today why you were not seeing the version that I thought was in the drive last time, and apparently if you don't download it as a Word document, it wasn't showing the edits. So the edits were there, and if you looked at them on the screen, they were there, but when you open the document, you don't see them. So Kathy found a workaround today to get that in, but I don't know if you've had time to look at that. It was in your
I did not.
paper packet too. So if you want, we can just put it on the next meeting, and now that she knows that that happens when we open them, she'll make sure that
So I
she
moved
uploads them in a different way.
the two policies to the next meeting.
Okay.
Anybody,
Second, that's Mr. Shipman.
you need to vote?
No.
Okay.
Policies, next meeting.
All right, you want to talk about the current status of the community and its COVID-related activities?
Sure. I updated your matrix today. County and town of Deerfield are still in universal masking for high levels of transmission according to the CDC formula. Rockingham County substantial, Deerfield active cases 52, Deerfield Community School 10, and percent of population fully vaccinated is 53.1. The CDC grid is on the back page if you're interested in looking at how they get you substantial, which is the PCR test positivity over 7 days is 29%. So that's, I've never seen one that high, so that's, I was hoping that wasn't a mistake on the map actually. It seems really high. And the number of new infections per 100,000 over 14 days is 1,763.
So, we had a hell of a spike, and then it looked like we got ahead of it, and it looks like we're climbing right back into it again.
I mean, I would remind you that the majority of the cases that we've traced back to not occur in school. They're not, the spread was not in the school, it was outside.
So I just want to clarify my understanding is, so, and maybe Brian or Patty can help me with this. So if a parent is at home and they have a child that is unvaccinated but asymptomatic, is that child permitted to come to school?
If you have a positive family member in your household and you are not vaccinated, you are required to quarantine.
By the state or by the district, by the state?
State.
So my concern is there is a number of, and I've only heard this through the grapevine, but as we all know, bad gas travels fast in a small town. But I've been led to believe that there are families in this community that are taking, that are sending their kids to school while mom or dad or a family member gets home, even though their children are not vaccinated, and been proud enough to go around town bragging about it. And so I'm gonna ask, you know, Brian or Patty, if you can reiterate as clearly as possible that that cannot happen in an email to the community. And any diligence we have to take to try to help stay ahead of it. But that most certainly doesn't help the situations. We all just work within the confines of what the state's asking us to do, and hopefully get results. But it's very disheartening to me to hear that there are people in this community that are taking joy in sending their kids to school, even though they should be at home, given the circumstances of what's going on. So, if you're doing that, please stop, and please reiterate so there's no confusion if you can, via whatever mechanisms you want to use that can happen.
And just get a phone call now
Yeah.
to remind folks.
Yeah.
We can probably attach the most recent guidance too, it's
Right.
pretty clear.
I would simplify it to the greatest extent you can, and then bold and underline.
Couple of sentences.
Make it red and yellow, and purple and green.
Mrs. really likes color coding her emails.
Yeah, and I mean, I see it there and I've read it multiple times, but again, it disheartening to hear that there's people that seem to be taking joy in sending their kids here, given the circumstances when they shouldn't. And if I knew the specific families, I'd certainly call them out publicly, but I don't, so I'm only relaying what I'm hearing anecdotally throughout the community.
I have just two questions. Patty, you got, these are today's numbers?
I went to the map and I've never seen a 29% positivity rate, so I just question if that's, like, how could 29% of your community members who are being tested be positive?
I certainly think what you're gonna
Seems-
find, I think that number you're gonna see is gonna climb because people are taking an at-home test, testing positive and then going and getting a PCR to verify that. And a lot of people that may be taking at-home tests that are testing negative aren't going and getting a PCR. So I suspect that
Oh, that's
the
true.
current availability of PCR, of
Yeah, I
the
didn't
at-home
think of it that
testing
way.
is
That could
going
be-
to
Yeah, more
significantly
people are doing that.
increase the PCR positivity rate. An interesting fact to look at would be to see how many people are currently taking the tests as opposed to, say, now versus 3 months ago when the at-home test one was over. Because you may see that,
And now in a couple of weeks, people will be getting free tests.
Yeah.
my wife bought them all.
You can buy free tests.
She just bought them.
The governor put out.
I think as of, in one day though, they were gone.
Of course.
Can you get us guidance from, Bonnie's conversation with Dr. Chan, CDC, on what the guidance is for when students are able to, you know, all of our 5 through 12 are able to be fully vaccinated? And what that guidance looks like and how it changed, if it changes.
And I would say, why don't we as a board, we probably are due to have a very robust conversation regarding this. And maybe it's worth scheduling for January.
The previous motion to maintain mandatory masks was through January.
Was through January. So then I would say that needs to go on January's agenda.
On the 5th or the 19th.
I'll leave that to the discretion of the board. But I certainly think we need to follow through with whatever the wording of our motion was. So,
I thought we voted on through January.
It said,
Yeah.
the motion said until children ages 5 through 12 have had the chance to be fully vaccinated. And basically as a fallback, I put in January 1st, if something happened that hadn't been approved.
It would be reviewed in January.
In the gray area in that motion was, all right, well, what constitutes kids 5 through 12 having had a chance to be fully vaccinated? I know plenty of people who are still waiting for that second shot, and it's 2 weeks after that. So I know people in the community are anxious for us to address it at the next meeting. We got on it right away with my younger child, and he won't be fully vaccinated until mid to late December, just because of how busy it was. So I think January is a safe time to do that, but I do think it's right that we prepare for a robust conversation. What concerns me is here we are again with a plain, public health policy. So if we could get as much information as we could from.
I'm not sure what they're gonna have to say. They've been very vague or very unwilling to be
oh, that's wonderful.
strong in their recommendations.
Which is fine, but
I will ask Bonnie, absolutely.
Yeah, what's
for
the
updates.
CDC saying? If the state doesn't step up,
Like, for instance, in Massachusetts, they set a bar of the school being 80% vaccinated. If the school was 80% vaccinated, then they were able not to have mask mandates. I guess I was wondering, Patty, about what our vaccination rate, will that become a number that we'll have, so that we, as a board, will.
Saying like internally inside the building.
I have a feeling the state is going to lump everybody into that one percentage. So now it's showing you're 53 point whatever percent vaccinated.
So the whole
I don't know
town,
if they're gonna separate out by age level.
Are we able to, we're not gonna mandate this vaccine because that's the state's responsibility to mandate vaccination. But are we able to at least ascertain who's vaccinated like we would with chicken pox or measles?
No, because it's not a required vaccine to attend school, so parents don't have to show proof of it. So we won't know unless they separated it out on the map or the parents voluntarily gave
So-
that information.
So there's two things I want to address. The first thing I'd like to address is this, are we able, or what, do we want to deal with this, we want to have a discussion in the first meeting and the second meeting? Our current status. What's the sense of the board?
can I question first?
You-
Understanding our current, the motion we were just describing,
Yeah.
does that extend into the holiday break? What's our current understanding of the motion that we passed?
Do we wanna ask Trish if she can look it up while we're talking?
Does that extend?
What the date
into-
was?
What the motion
I
was?
think, so the second question I have for Patty that I would like to know the answer to, but the board doesn't do it like that, but if we were to switch to, I want to word this right, can we require masks for all students and staff and allow them to opt out if they're fully vaccinated?
No.
No.
You're not allowed to, there's an actual legislation that you're not allowed to treat vaccinated, unvaccinated students.
Okay. And that is the difference between the private sector.
I'm just gonna ask a clarifying question.
Yes, to me or?
So Patty,
Okay.
so under the percent population fully vaccinated, is that our town or our
Yes.
school?
Town.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Seriously, that number hasn't moved.
But,
It does, little teeny bit, I think it
little
was
bit
like
higher.
52.9 or something, it moves like a tiny,
It's a
tiny
little
bit.
bit more than
and, is that data that Nurse Bonnie would have or not, because it's not a requirement, so she would
Correct.
have that data?
Correct, the only data she'll have is if parents volunteer the information.
It was, the motion was to be, change language to 5 to 11 years old and add if the vaccine does not pass or there are changes, for the NHD HHS guidelines, that the board will revisit the mask mandate at the January 3rd, 2022 meeting.
Sounds like that's what we're doing.
So the January 3rd meeting.
January 3rd.
All right.
Third's a Monday, so it'd be the 12th.
That's the fifth.
That'll be the meeting of the fifth.
Yeah.
Plus y'all want to get together on the third?
So as we currently understand this motion, then, it means that our students will be wearing masks up until that Wednesday, January 4th.
Fifth.
Or is that's the current understanding of that motion.
Could you read it again, the whole motion?
There was a motion to amend,
It was an
to
amendment.
change the language. This was the amendment. The original motion was Jeff Kelly made a motion seconded by Zach Langlois to adopt the NHD HHS matrix based on our town level data. Assessment of the most recently available data on the state of New Hampshire DHHS COVID-19 website shall be done every Friday, with parents being notified of the upcoming week's mask requirement by the end of the day Friday. If during any week the school is in a mask optional scenario and cases rise to a level where masking is suggested by the matrix to be mandatory, staff shall notify families via One Call Now, and masks shall be required the following day until the end of that week, where a new assessment of the data will be done for the upcoming week. This motion is to be revisited 5 weeks after the COVID-19 vaccine becomes available for children ages 5 to 11, or until such time that the masking guidance issued by the New Hampshire DHHS is changed. And then there was a motion, Jeff made the motion, seconded by Nate, to amend the motion to change the language to 5 to 11 years old, and add if the vaccine does not pass or there are changes to the New Hampshire DHHS guidelines, that the board will revisit the mask mandate at the change it to January 5th, 2022 meeting.
It's pretty complicated.
We've got to talk about it again at some point, whether,
Well, I know, my question is, when does it expire? And when,
well, so it doesn't necessarily expire.
I think
Policy is in place.
was that you were gonna revisit it at the,
So,
but that
that's
when.
very confusing.
Right, but that when the day when 11-year-olds can be fully vaccinated, because that's gonna happen in a couple of weeks, is what Jeff was saying. I agree.
effectively, right, that window for vaccinations to start, an opportunity to get your first vaccination, the time to expire to get your second vaccination, and then the time for the vaccination to take efficacy should be complete for the most part by that January 5th meeting. So the question is
I agree, but it's a gray date.
it is a great date, but we have to talk about it at a meeting. So it's either going to be we talk about it in January,
My only question
February,
is,
March.
will there be community members who interpret that grayness as saying December 20th?
No, because we're going to figure out what date we're going to talk about it tonight, hopefully, right? So they can interpret it, but it
We're
becomes
still not gonna, we're still gonna mandate the mask until at least that meeting.
until, yeah.
Part of the goal of the motion and the conversations at that time was to stop having a conversation.
I know.
Right.
On a nightly basis, but at some point we have to have the conversation.
So the reason that I think we have that date is so that at that meeting, we determine moving forward, the masks stay in place, optional, what other circumstances.
But we're agreeing that between now and the 5th, masks will be mandated by this.
I don't think anybody here has questioned that, I certainly haven't myself.
My interpretation of the motion is that we weren't going to discuss it again until that meeting, that we'll stop talking about it.
And I'd like to get back to that.
Okay.
So,
All right.
are we dealing with it on January 5th?
Yeah.
Please add that as an agenda item for the 5th.
Yes.
Okay. And can you give me a copy of that law that says everybody has to be treated fairly? See? I just want to read it. Thought I had to. All right. Anything else regarding that? We're done. Good. Next up, public comments from the public. Hello, public. Anybody? No one. All right. I want to continue to thank the Deerfield Fire Department for hanging out in our building so graciously. All right, next up, look for motion to go to non-public under New Hampshire RSA 91A3, 2, small letters A, C, and E.
I got it.
Moved by Gigi, I'm gonna give a second to Andy, because he was a little louder. Roll call, Jeff,
Aye.
Andy, Nate,
Yes.
Gigi,
Yes.
myself, yes. All right, it is, what is it? It is 7:30, we are in non-public, so if you don't need to be here, please excuse yourself. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Ryan,
Thank you.
please.
Click the button.